This
Pratt,
government needs to get on with it.
Senator Pratt, it being 2 p.m, we will move.
President, my question is to the Minister for Women's Safety, Senator Ruston. Can the % of the $260 million promised in the National Partnership Agreement on to frontline services?
The Minister for Women's Safety, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much. To be able to inform the chamber today that the agreement has been signed with the New South Wales Government and the money has been investment that we've made in frontline services. But that's in addition. That's that frontline services were able to have the additional resources to be able to those services. But we made sure that that $130 million went straight to the state. Recognition that the impact of domestic violence and family violence as a result of the pandemic did not communities. We put in place an additional $130 million per year. That's $130 million 2 years, somewhat more than $153 million over 5, to make sure services. In return for this, we have asked the states and territories to provide us with information demand, and I acknowledge today New South Wales has come forward and what actually is the issue, because as I said this morning in my contribution, eliminating family, sexual and domestic violence in this country is the federal government. State and territory governments have a responsibility to, and we will continue to work.
In October, this minister promised that there would be a meeting of the Women's Safety. Important things that will be addressed at that meeting will be the draft of the next national plan. Does the minister still intend to keep her promise?
Minister.
Thank you very much. Obviously, getting together a group of very busy ministers across the country sometimes is not and everybody in this chamber and everybody listening. The absolute priority of this government is to the draft will be consulted through the appropriate mechanisms, which are the advice through the victim survivor groups and also through the Women's Safety Ministers Task Force. Will meet all of the necessary targets and timelines so that it is in place along with the action plans, national plan and associated plans to commence on the 1st of July 2022 when the existing plan.
Australians believe that the Morrison-Joyce government will deliver any of its promises on domestic violence when it has failed.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, I am not going to take that kind of ridiculous statement than any other government in keeping Australian women safe. 1.1 on the 4th Action Plan. And I'd like to ask the chamber, does anybody know how 12-year plan put in place with bipartisan support by Julia Gillard 100% invested in the first action plan by those opposite, and they come in Australian women who need the support that this government is totally committed to doing something that anybody on that side has any credibility in.
Senator Askew.
Senator Ruston. Noting that today is the International Day for the Elimination commitment to addressing this critical issue.
The Minister for Women's Safety, Senator.
Also her ongoing interest and advocacy on this particular issue. Well, today it is really that family, sexual and domestic violence is on our nation. 1 in 4 Australian women experience physical violence at the hands of a partner since they reach the domestic violence is absolutely devastating on survivors. That is why we made $1 investment in the 21-22 budget. And whilst those on the other side will seek to, what I would say is look at our track record. We are addressing this issue and we will continue to do so. Escaping violence payment, a program which was the first of its kind in a national scale. A violent relationship by providing them with $5,000 of supports to make sure that they have got a platform. Heard a number of really positive stories about women who've accessed that support. We also hosted the first ever national that we provide the resources in all areas of responsibility, whether it be leadership, a national partnership agreement, providing safe places so women have got somewhere to go, to every single Australian. We are listening to you and we are acting.
Minister, how important is listening to the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait women?
Mr President, well, as policymakers, we must not just listen, we must recognise women and girls and empower them to develop and deliver programs for their own. Deliver the final stages of Commissioner June Oscar's Women's Voices project and real and tangible results plan. And this will include a summit that will be chaired by Commissioner Oscar, as well as obviously delivering the extraordinary important issue of family, domestic and sexual violence. It's important, not just as a government, but as a country, we reaffirm our commitment to
Supplementary.
Thank you. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the government is protecting
Minister. Order. Order.
Violence against women and children is everybody's business, and if we really are we must give people the tools and the education to understand how their behaviours about respectful behaviours and around consent. And that's why we have announced that we are investing the START campaign. be able to call out disrespectful behaviours and attitudes. Evaluation of the community, with more than 2/3 of Australians actually recognising this campaign and respect. We must make sure every Australian knows how to do that and does it.
Representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Yesterday, the Minister told the Senate that Mr violent and threatening comments directed at Premier Andrews and Catherine King MP. Morrison had in fact done nothing, and it was Mr Joyce who'd done so.
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr Christensen is...
Oh, that's pathetic.
Senator. Order. Senator.
Comments on Mr Christensen's Telegram posts have been completely... Who made that decision?
Minister.
Of those accounts are, which I would assume to be the member for Dawson.
On my right, Senator Ayres, a supplementary question.
About his call.
Minister.
Well, thanks, Mr President. Well, I think Mr Morrison spoke to those remarks. Mr Christensen, Mr Morrison. In relation to his view that every single person should obey the law.
Order.
Morrison made very clear in the House in relation to a question on this matter.
Order. Senator Rice.
Thanks, Mr President. My question is to the for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender and gender diverse students who faced being expelled. Their PM understands and is going to take action to fix it. Attorney General, it's been students. Are you rushing legislation that's going to increase the ability to discriminate against LGBTIQ students rather?
I call the Attorney General, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Rice for the question you have put in relation to the religious discrimination bill that the Prime Minister today introduced into the House of Representatives. It is actually wrong. You would be aware that Australia is a religiously Act. We have a Racial Discrimination Act. We have a Disability Discrimination Act. But what we currently don't have in this country is protections for people of to fill that gap. Sex Discrimination Act, and these protections or exemptions for religious bodies supported by both sides of parliament. In fact, in 2013, when Mr Dreyfus was the Discrimination Act, but ensured at the same time that the protections for religious bodies were maintained. But in relation Act, Mr. President. This is about protecting people of the summation you have put to the Senate, Senator Rice, is
question.
The Prime Minister said he was going to take action to protect LGBTI. Can't report before 2023. Students who started high school in 2018. Minister Stoker on radio this morning was very clear that this bill will continue to allow schools to another time where the Prime Minister has lied to save his political skin.
Order.
That clearly, Prime Minister.
Senator McKim on the point of order.
Yeah, just briefly on the point of order. Senator Rice was asked.
There is no protection merely in asking a question. To withdraw the last part of the question, and then I will allow the minister to answer. Just withdraw. Thank you, Senator Rice. The Attorney-General has the call.
Discrimination bill would only prohibit discrimination on the basis of only operate in relation to that prohibition. Religious bodies have, and as I said, that the Labor Party supported, himself recognised. Discrimination Act, Mr. President, the exemptions would continue to apply to religious bodies. Senator, I have made it very clear to the ALRC. We have a very clear experience because of their sexual identity.
Minister. Senator Rice, just before you... I should have let you restate the question, so I apologise for that, but let's move to your second supplementary.
Legal for someone to tell their sporting teammate that it's sinful for them as a single mother to have a child, is lesbian, needs to find a husband, and it will be legal for someone to say that they don't recognise their
The Attorney-General.
Senator Rice, and I would hope we could all agree with this, that simply stating the fact that you don't have a belief in good faith in and of itself. The way you have put it, you're implying it would be a malicious statement, it would be a statement perhaps with intent to intimidate. Mr. President, is not acceptable. But I would believe in Australia that the ability of people to freely discuss their religion or lack of religion, to freely be able to explain their religion, Mr. President, that each and every one of us can support.
Just before you start your question, Senator Keneally, I will remind you do need to be able to listen.
Mr. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Mr. Morrison stood up this morning to say action because of his Jewish faith. LNP MP George Christensen has previously appeared on a neo-Nazi podcast on his telegram, referencing the Great Reset and global elites, as well. Does Mr. Morrison think these anti-Semitic posts from Mr. Christensen are not serious enough to even warrant?
Order. Order. Senator Seselja, Senator Wong. Senator Birmingham. Order.
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. President, Cash was just discussing around the topic of discrimination, or indeed I have no place, whether it be or their race or their faith, and on all of those matters they rightly deserve a number of assertions in relation to what is being posted by the member for Dawson. But and I'm sure Senator Keneally, if she wishes, can certainly provide them to me at a later point. We would condemn any such actions that promoted anti-Semitism, just as we promoting any sense of lack of tolerance of people of any other faith or of respect.
President, I seek leave to table a copy of the social media post that I just referred to.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
My supplementary. Mr. Christensen has posted about Premier Palaszczuk, inciting comments featuring images a noose was needed, sharing details of which venue she visits, suggesting someone harass her, asking where Lee Harvey from a tree. Does Mr. Morrison think Mr. Christensen's posts are not serious enough to even warrant a conversation?
Order.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, as I said before, I've said many times to condemning those who seek to incite any violence, a lack of the fact that we do not accept violence or intolerance, particularly on grounds in relation to attributes the nature of which I spoke of before. Mr. President, Mr. President, there are clear Senator Keneally has referenced some of those earlier this week in terms of if certain matters had been referred again, Senator Keneally copies of them in advance.
Minister, your time has expired. Please resume your seat. Senator Keneally, a second supplementary.
I seek leave.
There being no objection, leave is granted.
Will Mr. Morrison now speak to Mr. Christensen of violence and anti-Semitic sentiment for his own?
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I indicated earlier, that both the National Party has spoken to him.
Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Andrews Labor government in Victoria has refused to rule out mandating COVID-19 government support COVID-19 without written parental permission.
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator
thank Senator Roberts for his question. Mr. President, have a COVID-19 vaccine are that's part of the process by which we've put in place those receiving the vaccine to provide a consent. Now, of course, in some circumstances, worked with the states to require some members of the workforce system and some frontline workers, people working in circumstances but we have said as much as possible it should be a voluntary process, Mr. President, and I think the Australian people have demonstrated participate in the vaccination program. We're over 90% first dose and in their droves to get vaccinated. And looking at the figures this morning, Mr. to take up a booster shot, which is a bit over 500,000 who 5% of those have turned up to pick up to have a booster shot, Mr. President. So overwhelmingly, I think of the importance and the value.
Senator Roberts, a supplementary question.
I thank the Minister for his answer. Governments are unable to force COVID-19 injections on school children in Australia.
The Australian government continues to work cooperatively with the states. States and territories have, within their own realm, overwhelmingly from a national perspective, the position of the Australian government should be a voluntary program, and as Australians have overwhelmingly demonstrated their desire to be vaccinated because they know that we have them, their families and their communities, and that's important, Mr. President. And I would urge all application of vaccines.
Has expired. Senator Roberts, a second supplementary.
That he did not support governments forcing injection mandates. Yet state and territory governments are What measures has the Morrison government taken to ensure that Australian federal, state injection mandates?
Very early in the answer to the primary question, for Australians to provide consent, or in the circumstance of a minor child between a consent to be provided. That's the circumstance that comply with that process, that there is a consent provided and would be taken into account as a part of that process. My experience workforce sector, for example, those that received medical exemptions was about 0.3%. When providing
Minister,
vaccines to Australians.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Henderson.
Security, Senator Hume. Government is supporting the economic prosperity of Australian women as we reopen Australia after the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Minister for Women's Economic Security, Senator Hume.
The future prosperity of Australia's women. On this day, where we recognise the President acknowledged that the Morrison government is very much backing Australia's women to reach their full potential. Participate fully in the economy. The Morrison government has put money where our mouths are, investing $3.4 billion, including investments in women's safety, their economic security and their health and well-being. Recovery from COVID-19. Under this government, the women's workforce participation rate is on an up. Impacts of lockdowns and the pandemic. Mr. President, we are achieving this by creating more choices. The Morrison government has invested $1.7 billion to improve the affordability of childcare by increasing the children. We know, Mr. President, that these are the parents, the majority of whom are women. We also have removed the annual subsidy cap to support the choices of Australian families when it changes are estimated to directly benefit around 250,000 Australian families, adding up to is the equivalent of around 40,000 in $1.5 billion every single year. Our focus is always on practical outcomes that make a real.
Expired. Senator Henderson, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can the Minister outline to the Senate how the government economic future?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Morrison government understands that the standard setter. And that's one reason why we're supporting more women into leadership positions and the jobs for the future. And it's a lived reality and a priority in order to create the digital economy. Paid sectors of our economy. Our government is committed to ensuring that there are more talented, $2.4 million over 7 years to support more women with higher level STEM qualifications. Flexible micro-credentials. Universities to offer scholarships and identifying STEM fields with the highest growth potential to support women into the jobs of the future. Leadership and Development Program, where we committed a further $39.8 million.
Has expired. Senator Henderson, a second supplementary.
Of a collaborative approach across government and industry in reducing barriers to improve women's economic.
President, again, thank you, Senator Henderson. The Morrison government recognises that reducing the gender pay gap requires targeted policy and partnership. But before I talk about what's ahead, let me point out where we've come from. When we took office, the gender pay gap was 17.2%. Now, there is more to do. There is more to do. And as a government, we believe not put in place for show. We believe in implementing policies that shift that dial, not policies have real substance.
Minister. Order on my left. I couldn't possibly hear what the minister was saying. Minister, you have the call.
Thank you very much,
Order.
Mr. President.
Senator
That's why
Keneally.
we put in policies in place that actually to give millionaires free childcare. Millionaires free
Order.
childcare. Instead, that's what review of the Workplace Gender or Equity Agency to determine how government can further encourage the private sector to do its bit.
Has expired. Order. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for who were issued 449 visas were of 3-month duration and are about to start expiring. DFAT advice during the 4 nationals in Afghanistan who hold Australian visas should not attempt to leave Afghanistan due to the dangers. Advice are now safely in Australia, but those who followed the DFAT advice and stayed in Afghanistan are what is doing is advising them to apply for other classes of visa. The 449 visas represent a life you cannot in conscience snatch away. Will the minister do the right thing and extend those 449 visas from the Taliban that was offered 3 months ago?
The Minister representing the Minister for Immigration, Senator Cash.
Thanks, Senator McKim, for the question. And Senator Kim, I hope you would join with me in acknowledging that Australia does have a long and most in need. In terms of the safety in particular of locally engaged employees, Australia's mission in Afghanistan that has done
Minister,
an outstanding job.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator McKim on a point of order.
Thank you, President. The point of order is relevant. Locally engaged employees. That was most emphatically not part of the question I asked.
Senator McKim, I am listening carefully to the minister's answer. She has only been going for a chance to bring you back to the question, but I am listening carefully.
Thank you. And Senator McKim, what I was saying was why on the 18th of November 2021 the Australian government announced that the subclass 449 visa Australia's mission in Afghanistan and their families who had not yet arrived in Australia will be extended. Subclass 449 holders who are certified locally engaged employees of the Department of Defence, the Department of Police and other persons with working relationships with the Australian side the locally engaged employee program who are granted a subclass priority in Australia.
Senator McKim, a supplementary question.
Very little or no comfort there. Foul any Afghan national currently in Australia. But what are you doing to ensure they have access to family reunion and pathways to permanent residency? Will you help these people and their families to leave them in limbo with the threat of being returned to Afghanistan hanging over their heads?
McKim, again, I would hope you would acknowledge that certainly when it comes to the safety of those who Australia is doing what it can, and we have put in place what is a high priority for our government. In that regard, I do commend for her involvement in this process. Mr President, for evacuees who have already humanitarian visa, the Department of Home Affairs, they will continue
Minister. Seat. Senator McKim on a point.
On relevance, this question is not about evacuees. This is about any Afghan national. That was very clear in the question, very clear. And I can't believe the minister hasn't got a brief on this, by the way.
Senator McKim, you don't. You have brought the minister back to the question. I'm listening very carefully to the minister's answer. Requirement to answer the question, and I would give you the call.
Thank you. And Senator McKim, I will seek to get it. I am trying, however, to provide you with the relevant information that I do have in terms of, in particular, the permanent part refugees. And as immigration law changed to allow Afghan evacuees 49 visa to apply for an offshore humanitarian visa.
Senator McKim, a second.
There are just under 7,500 waiting to have their partner visas processed or permanent residence. Some are in hiding in Afghanistan at risk of imminent death. Many thousands have been waiting for to issue them 449 visas so they can come to Australia and be safe while their substantive visas are being processed.
Again, Senator McKim, the government, as you would know, we recognise the importance of family reunion for refugees. You would also know that our humanitarian program reunites refugees and people who are in refugee-like situations over.
Senator McKim, a point of order.
Once again, on relevance, the question was not about refugees of Australian citizens and permanent residents who have not about refugees or humanitarian entrants. I ask you to draw the minister to the question.
I will allow you to draw. I do not yet believe that I can say that. Give the minister the call, and I am the. Senator Wong, I'm
Mr.
ruling.
President, I'm sorry. There is no point of order.
I am ruling that. No, I'm ruling there is no point of order. I'm listening carefully to the answer.
Before you formally rule, or if you haven't, just put to you, Senator McKim, class of visa to the class that the minister is speaking about. It is not relevant, and I'd make that submission to you consistent with our your role in calling the minister to the question.
Senator Wong, the minister has a question. I do not. The minister is being directly relevant. We call the minister back to the question, and I am listening carefully. Attorney General, you have the call.
Thank you, and Senator McKim, if I can get any. We do not want any information in relation to engaged employees, etc., more generally, but to the extent that I can get further information from the minister, I'll do that.
Senator Chicane.
Representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. Is the Morrison-Joyce government prepared to consider an override of the existing Rennick and Antic?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as I indicated in my answer to Senator Roberts earlier, the government has always been, through the vaccine program, that vaccination, as much as possible, should be a voluntary process. And in my answer to that question, we're in excess of 86% second dose, and as I indicated to the chamber before, of the 508,000 Australians who are eligible, over 375 of.
Minister, please resume your seat.
Held this position that, obviously short, sharp questions are much do require a greater degree of relevance. Not about Australians getting vaccinated. It was a simple question about whether the government is prepared to consider some coalition senators proposed. That was the only topic raised.
I will agree, Senator. A fairly narrowly phrased question. Senator Birmingham, sorry, were you seeking? No? Sorry. Question. I am listening carefully to your answer. I do note that you have only been speaking for a short part of your answer so far. I will bring you back.
The thing I said was that the Australian government's position way through has been that as much as possible the vaccination program for Australians should be and supported by health advice, and that has been worked through with the states, and the states have put in place through public health orders supports.
Order.
For health workers, for frontline health workers, for aged care workers, for home care workers, and circumstances where the health advice has indicated that, we have supported the process of mandates, Mr. President. But we have said all the way through.
Minister, resume your seat.
A point of order, Mr. President. My point of order is relevance. Again, just making the point that has not yet gone to the very vaccine mandates.
Mr. President, well, on the point of order in this regard, Mr. President, the opposition is now seeking to dictate the terms in which you did bring. The minister has been directly addressing issues in relation to mandates as they apply. Clearly been addressing those issues in relation to mandates and the voluntary application of the vaccine rollout that may be seeking a yes or no type answer is not indeed, as many presidents have ruled very clearly, how a minister answers the question. The answer needs to be directly relevant to the question, and Senator Colbeck, by addressing issues relevant.
Senator Wong, on the point
Thank
of order.
you. On the point of order, that last submission to you is clearly not consistent with precedent, and if you. Secondly, we are not seeking a yes or no answer. We simply want him to address the issue of override. And that was the question.
I've been listening very carefully to the minister's answer. That is being on this, but I am happy to give the call back to Senator Colbeck at this point if he wishes to continue.
I will, as I was just doing, restate the government's position again, which has not changed. That the vaccination program for Australians should be a voluntary program where at all possible. Through AHPPC and the National Cabinet, the federal government, the Commonwealth government has supported some. The Australian government has not changed that this should be a voluntary program where at all possible.
Your time has expired. Senator Ciccone.
The government sought any advice.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I've indicated a number of times already, and I'm prepared to do again, to voluntary. Mr. President, the mandates that are being applied in states and territories are law, not Commonwealth law. The Commonwealth's position in respect of those is that the mandate in identified high-risk settings, events and contexts, and should be given effect through state and territory public health orders, which
Minister,
but our position throughout.
Minister, please resume your seat. On a point of
President,
order,
yes,
Senator Ciccone.
on direct relevance, has the minister sought any advice? And that was the heart of the question that I asked.
I'm listening carefully to the minister's answer. You've brought to the minister's answer. Minister, you have the
and I've indicated to you through that the circumstances under which I will take on notice whether there's been.
Senator Ciccone, a second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the arrangements which allow states and territories to enforce vaccine mandates in order to secure
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senator McKenzie indicates the State's House. However, the government's position with respect to the vaccine rollout has not changed. Ciccone asks me the same question in a different way. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have to give a completely different answer. Mr. President, the government's position completely clear, Mr. President. We have a position that's been consistent all the way through. The vaccination program, except for the circumstances that I've indicated. Mr. President, it's a clear and it's a consistent position that we have provided all the way through, Mr. President. The same question in a different way doesn't mean that I'm.
Davey.
Thank you very much. The Minister for Employment, Workforce. Can the Minister please outline to the Senate how the Liberals and Nationals in government are pushing businesses to have the confidence to invest as we secure Australia's economic recovery from the COVID-19?
The Minister for Employment, Senator Cash.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank Senator Davey for her question, and in particular small businesses. And in particular in the lead up to Christmas, where each and every one of us should be looking to spend whatever money we can with our Australia. Mr. President, as the Australian economy, and in particular communities.
Please resume your seat. Senator Ayres, I have called you to order by name 3 times. Cease interjecting.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. from Senator Ayres across the chamber. These businesses economic recovery. Now, talk about employment.
Order.
Well, can I tell you?
Senator
I can tell you, Senator Ayres, on this side of the chamber, we're always happy to talk, because since we were elected to govern, Treasury said unemployment would be. You look at where unemployment is now. It is because of the policies put in place by the Morrison and that so many more Australians. In particular, what we want to do is say a big.
Order.
Because, colleagues, as you all know, those on the other side, the closest they've ever come to a small business is to close it down. Close small businesses across Australia. What would that have done to all of the small business? People lose jobs. And making sure, Mr. President, they have a job.
Senator Davey. Attorney General, I would remind you to direct your remarks through the chair.
For that response too. Can you also explain how taxes has helped to create more jobs? Businesses across Australia.
This is a continuation of government. We will do everything in our Australians themselves. They're able to keep more of their own. In direct contrast, colleagues, direct contrast, their gift to the Australian people would have legislated it with the help of the Australian Greens, 300 in additional taxes. And, Mr. President, to that policy, and just weeks ago we saw Labor was planning higher taxes on 300,000 family businesses for business in this country.
Please resume. Supplementary.
Thank you. Why is it so important to support small and family businesses, the small business-led economic recovery that we're on?
Sorry, no, Attorney General, you have the call.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Again, we back small and family businesses and businesses generally in Australia. They are the job creators in this country. Governments don't in Australia prosper, grow, or we will never be, Senator Davey, on the or side. Some reason, and yet business are the to back our job creators every step of the way. If there is a place that will ensure that they have the capacity to create more jobs for Australians, Mr. President, that is exactly every single step of the way.
Senator
President, my question is to the Attorney General, Senator Mr Morrison promised, and I quote, "I will be are introduced as soon as practicable to make it Why do the Morrison-Joyce
the Attorney-General, Senator Cash.
made. The Prime Minister was very clear in the work. In the first instance, we said that we would refer to the Australian Law Reform Commission. The reason we have done that religious bodies in discrimination law across Australia. We implemented the religious freedom of that. The Prime Minister himself introducing representatives, the religious discrimination of faith and those not of faith. The Prime Minister has been very, very clear. I have formally written to the Australian Law Reform Commission clear the government's duality.
Senator.
When the Attorney-General's Assistant Minister, Senator Stoker, and I quote, "Look, I'm not going to split hairs over." Senator Cash agree with Senator Stoker that protect
Order. Order. Attorney-General.
Into this chamber and demeans the bill and all that it stands for. It is deliberately, probably for a political. I have tried to depoliticise this and a political bill that could get. Senator Sheldon, you will be aware, because it was who in 2013, when a member you actually were the ones, and we agreed with you, exemptions to religious bodies. Shame on you.
Order. Order. Senator Sheldon.
11th of October.
Order. Senator Wong.
Mr Morrison promised to change the law to protect LGBT nation, and I quote, "Before the end of the year, confirm at the earliest the Morrison 2023 made his promise."
Attorney-General.
For religious bodies, including religious educational institutions, you did nothing whilst you were in government. As I said, in 2013, and did add some protected attributes to the sex including religious educational institutions currently had, would be extended.
Order.
So saying that you want to you have ever stood for. The Prime Minister, no student should be.
Minister. To exit the chamber.